Welcome back, folks. Bob from BBD. Fast and Furious, geopolitics, fast-moving landscape in Afghanistan, right? You had this crazy bomb blast, and you had a very emotional Biden who's basically saying he's going to hunt them down. Hunt who down? I don't know, because ISI-K is kind of comes out of the woodwork, goes back into the woodwork. It's like shooting down mules. I mean, you see just one, but barely going to be seeing any targets, right? Lots of conspiracy theories around the ISI-K. The first doing the rounds, obviously, through some of our analysts, is this, that obviously what's being trying to be done right now with this bomb blast is the blame is, even without launching any investigation, the blame has been laid on the grounds of the ISI-K. And one of the reasons behind that, I can understand, is the United States wants to pull out, right? They don't want to have an excuse to stay. So they've pinned this on ISI and K, kind of protected Pakistan, protected Taliban. But have the Taliban and Pakistan gotten a free pass? I don't think so. I think this is a matter of time before the United States will go back after them if these guys don't deliver. ISI-K, on the other hand, as they say, actually could be Indira Gandhi Bhindarwar. I've been told that they've been created by the Pakistani ISI to launch these attacks to kind of for plausible deniability on those attacks, right? So it's a funny thing. Taliban's has been used to or has helped in hunting down ISI-K. But the picture that's coming out of Afghanistan, obviously, is that it's far easier to have this crazy takeover, right? Helped by the Pakistani ISI and the army. But it is going to be extremely difficult to control. And one of the conditions laid down by the West is that for recognition is that there's got to be some kind of reconciliation. But that doesn't seem to be happening. And also what's happening, one must realize, is there's all these negotiations were done by these guys who are trying to up their profile in Doha as sophisticated, suave international guys. But the guys fighting on the ground are still the jihadis, the extreme jihadis, and they are not going to really come down and listen to these guys who are sitting in Kabul. So it's not, and China who thinks that we've got it, or Russia who thinks we certainly get the mines. You got to remember, if the United States couldn't get it for goddamn 20 years, it's China, Russia, Pakistan is certainly going to land on a gold mine. You think of all this $1 trillion rare metals? Absolutely not, folks.
We will respond with force and precision at our time, at the place we choose, in the moment of our choosing.
हम तुम्हें मारेंगे और जरूर मारेंगे, लेकिन वो बंदूक भी हमारी होगी, गोली भी हमारी होगी, और वक्त भी हमारा होगा.
So what does an emotional Biden have to say? We will hunt you down and make you pay. Biden vows to avenge Kabul attacks. I'm not sure who he's going to hunt down, because these guys are in and out of the woodwork. They're not really available targets, clear targets, right? We will hunt you down. Biden vows to avenge Afghan attacks. Will respond with force and precision at a time, at place of our choosing. Well, I think it's going to be at the place of their choosing, right? Amid Afghan chaos, a CIA mission that persists for years, this bombing has really now created another confusion in the CIA. Spy agency had plans to de-emphasize counter-terror ops to focus on rising global powers, but that obviously is going to be, difficult to handle. Day after Afghanistan bombing, toll up to 170, evacuations resumed, SIF Afghans dead in Pak firing at Torkham border. China calls on Taliban to sever all ties with terrorists. They're smoking a pipe, as is this General Bajwa. Pakistan Army claims India outreach in Afghanistan aimed to harm Islamabad. I guess this is kind of a phobia they have. Shingla to visit US next week. Obviously, top of the list, Afghanistan. More Black Hawks helicopters with Taliban with 85% of the countries. So this is kind of a fallacy that is being spread by now the Republicans to nail Biden. Unfortunately, what the problem is, they may have the Black Hawks, but they don't have the wherewithal to fix them, to fly them, because the contractors have left. Because had they had it, the Afghan Air Force would not have left the Taliban have such a free pass. And what do we have here? Islamic State strikes terror. Western powers wrongly conflated the ISK's inability to hold territory in Nangarhar and Kunar provinces in eastern Afghanistan, and the surrender of hundreds of its fighters in the late 2019 as a reflection of its diminishing capabilities. The group continued carrying out deadly terror attacks in Afghanistan cities, including a daring jailbreak in Jalalabad in August last year and a suicide bombing outside girls' school in Shia's neighborhood of Kabul in May. Afghan experts believe the ISK recruited more fighters for an urban terrorism campaign after it became convinced last year that it would only be a matter of time before the Taliban came to power. Its latest assault poses significant challenges for the Taliban, especially at a time when the group is attempting to prove that it is a genuine purveyor of an Islamic system based on the Sharia, while attempting to gain legitimacy in the eyes of the world community by providing governance to Afghan people, folks. This is going to be really, really difficult. Okay, here we go. The Ideology and Evolution of Islamic State Khorasan, as written by Rezo Laskar. He says, since the beginning, IS has had a complicated relationship with the Taliban, though both comprise Sunni Muslim fighters. ISK also attracted commanders from Lashkar-e-Taiba, such as Aslam Faruqi. Besides Afghanistan and Pakistanis, the ISK also attracted fighters from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Indonesia, Iran, Russia, the Maldives, and India. Afghan officials such as former spy chief Amrullah Saleh have contended that Pakistan had a hand in the creation of ISK to carry out attacks in Afghanistan with the element of deniability, like I said, right folks? Over the past 6 years, IS and the Taliban have clashed frequently, especially in the eastern province of Kunar, Nangarhar and Naristan provinces. More significantly, it was able to establish sleeper cells with Kabul that were used to carry out a string of deadly suicide attacks, mostly targeting the Shia Hazara minority. Experts now believe ISK will continue to challenge the Taliban as it tries to form the next administration in Kabul and take steps to gain legitimacy in the eyes of the world community. Douglas London, a former senior CIA operations officer, told USA Today that ISK maintains its capabilities to launch deadly attacks, and those are the reasons they and the Taliban are mortal enemies. Because ISISK represents a competitor, they represent a competitor for resources, materials and power, and even though they are relatively small, he said. And more importantly, just look at this. Taliban needs more than Pakistan expertise. Now that's becoming pretty clear, right? The Taliban have now been administered the lesson about how amenable terror is to control once you have legitimized it and allowed it to run rampant. The Taliban and the Islamic State, whose South Asia chapter called the IS Khorasan, are part of a continuum of faith-based terror. The ISK reportedly considers the Taliban to be inadequately pure and inadequately ruthless. And there lies the McCoy, right? To govern the Taliban need more than mastery of terror, more than Pakistan expertise, man. That's the real challenge that they have, folks. More later. Okay, so what does Kabir Taneja write? He says Afghanistan's anarchic jihadist landscape. That's the true fact, right? Despite the Taliban being a predominant part of the Afghan jihadist landscape, it is imperative to remember that there are more than 20 terror groups have thrived in Afghanistan. Many of these groups are not Afghan and come from the neighborhood due to the availability of the safe spaces, resources and access to financial tools such as smuggling, opium cultivation and arms trade. All of this is tied to a level of ideological cohesion and acceptance of the fact that Taliban reigns supreme. But this has not prevented deep differences and conflict among the groups. This is a point to remember, point to ponder. So while we have the Chinese Global Times, the most senseless publication, just like Times of India and the kiss-ass here, Godi media, that's she media, right? How the Taliban handles the heterogeneous landscape and these complexities while attempting to politically mainstream itself will be its biggest test. As scholar Harsh Pant noted, in Afghanistan, there is never an end game but always a game in progress. And this is something that Vikram Sood, right, which I've mentioned. Wolves in wolves' clothing. True. He says the sudden ability to collect this information about Thursday's attacks, even as bodies and the injured were being removed from the site so soon after a failure to predict the fall of Kabul, only makes the claim appear to be motivated. So as to build a new narrative, Americans would find it embarrassing to be seen as the ones who negotiated their exit with the Taliban just a few months ago, only to have an attack which killed more than 150, including at least 13 Americans and 28 Taliban soldiers. The primary goal thus would be to get the Taliban and by extension Pakistan or any of its assets out of the firing line and let the blame fall on ISK, itself a possible front of the Haqqani network. This is important to note, right? This would suit the Taliban too. It matters little to Afghans if this was Taliban or ISK that conducts this mass murder. The primary message of fear among Afghans and foreigners in Afghanistan as a means of control has been delivered. Okay, what do we have here? What Dipanjay Chaudhary writes, Taliban ISK Haqqani cocktail sets alarm bells ringing in India. India is in close touch with major international partners to evaluate the security situation in Afghanistan following Thursday's deadly terror attacks that could be a handiwork of ISI-backed Islamic State Khorasan. So India has no doubt who the ISI Khorasan is, folks. And neither should you. Neither should America. Cheers. Later.
This is Afghanistan. Alexander the Great tried to conquer this country. Then Genghis Khan, then the British, now Russia. But Afghan people fight hard, they never be defeated. Ancient enemy, make prayer about these people. You wish to hear? Very good. It says, may God deliver us from the venom of the cobra, teeth of the tiger, and the vengeance of the Afghan. You understand what this means?
That you guys don't take any shit.
So folks, you can see Afghanistan is in a turmoil. Everybody who thought they've laid a golden egg is now struggling. For India to be as despondent as sometimes you see here in the chatter, or even for the United States to be that, have that kind of despondency, it's all domestic politics essentially in the United States. It's like the blame game between the Republicans, the XG army, and all these guys against Biden. The reality is, you had to pull out. And any pulling out, believe me, with the kind of actors, the spaghetti of as Kabir Taneja said, of the different groups, the conflicts, was just not going to be possible or easy. Somebody or the other was going to be out there to ruin the withdrawal, to embarrass the United States. In this case, it's not only embarrassing the United States, but it also is a case of showing up the Taliban, because there's been this animosity, like I said, a huge animosity between the Taliban and the ISIS. Well, because ISIS don't think that these guys are as pure or as brutal as they should be as per the Sharia law. So it's going to be interesting, because the world, at least forget the world, China believes, or Russia believes, or Pakistan believes, or they're banking on these guys showing a better side of themselves so that they can get global recognition. Because without global recognition, without global funds and global aid and global systems, China is not going to be able to carry this load, no matter what people think of them as this guys with technology and money. No, did you see this Wang Yi fellow between those two mullahs? Hey, he seemed as out of place as fish out of water, man. They don't know how to tackle extreme Islam. Their way to handle extreme Islam is boom, put them in jail, reconfigure their brains and bring them out as good Chinese. Will the ISI course listen to the good old Imran, or the good old Bajwa, or the good old ISI? I don't think so. So I don't think so. And when you talk about the blowback, right? The blowback essentially is going to start with the guys physically bordering Afghanistan. There's China, then there is the Central Asian nations. See what's happening there, right? Russia to fast-track arms supply to Central Asia after Kabul airport attack. So Russia is really, really worried. It also cannot have. It has its own problems with Chechnya and Dagestan, and those fighters are among the ISIK, right? So they are kind of worried a lot. But Putin may think he's a big shot and all that. But while everybody's having a good laugh at the United States of what they've done in Syria, what they've done in Libya, but look at it this way, folks. Once they withdrew, right? The United States withdrew from Syria, withdrew from Libya, more or less withdrawing from Iraq. All of a sudden you're finding Russia running away too, because now what's it going to do there, right? What's it going to do there? It doesn't need the oil, right? There are no, resources. It doesn't have an industry that can use these resources, right? It has no real industrial base except for the defense base, right? So where is it going to use all these trillions of dollars of resources that are going to come out of the rare earth? And let me just think about the rare earth, right? Rare earth availability is there globally, right? Whether it's in India, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Australia. It's the processing. The processing is in China, right? Now that processing, once there is effort made in the United States, or even in a joint venture between Japan and India, I think that can be tackled substantially, at least for the next few years, right? Like the next many years. So then you have Turkey, who suddenly got left out in the cold when Ghani flew the coup, right? He was supposed to take over the management of the protection of the airport, which he declined. But here again he says Taliban wants us to operate Kabul airport, but no decision has been made, says Turkey. Then you have the UN chief calls UNSC meet in Afghanistan. I think the only sure way, really, I think it's the world must actually consider that. You cannot force your system on the Afghans. Just like Russia, the United States, is going to be extremely, extremely difficult for China to try and. China pretends that it leaves you all alone, but at the end of the day, right, it gets your claws into basically your resources, and then you have trouble, right? And that is where the challenge for this government is going to really, really lie, folks. India should sit back, because we have a buffer between us and Pakistan, right? And that's an important buffer. You really can't expect, people who think that the Taliban or the Haqqani network is suddenly going to be driving through this main highway that runs through Pakistan onto the Indian border. Ain't going to happen, folks. Ain't going to happen. So relax. Let's just get our economy back in order. Let's hope that we don't play this Taliban into our domestic politics in UP, because there is where things will go wrong. There is where things will go wrong. Cheers, Jai Hind.